So very good afternoon to one and all. So in the last class we have seen about the main objectives of a man instrumentation system. In the last class where we discussed about the what are the main objectives of man instrumentation system and how we can measure the measuring methods. So two types of measuring methods we are considered for the biomedical applications. Okay, so and coming to components of the man instrument system, or we can call it as a biomedical instrument system also. Okay, so what are the main components which are required for the man instrumentation system? Okay, so the main purpose of instrumentation system is to measure the physiological or a parameter. Okay, after measuring that parameter, we have to process. After processing that parameter, we have to record. At the same time, we have to store or we have to send to some other location. Okay, so if the measured variable is satisfying with the required things, then it is okay. If it is not, or the measured variable is not correct, or it is deviating from the set point or required output, then we have to send some feedback signal. By that feedback signal, it will makes the error should be correction. Okay, error should be made correct. Okay, based upon that correction, so we will get the proper input from the transducers. Okay, so after reaching the set point, we have to get the proper output. So like this, the instrumentation system will be works. If you consider an industry, so in an industry we have a number of parameters is to be required to control. So that is temperature, pressure, flow rate of the liquid, okay, and level of the materials in the tank. In the tank, we have to maintain the level of the liquid or a solid particles or some gases. Okay, so as the instrumentation system will first of all will measures the any one of these parameters. Okay, and if the obtained variable is reached, okay, so obtained variable from the transducer is compared with the known or standard some value. If the measured variable is matching with that particular variable, then it is no problem. If there is some deviating with the standard or some known values, so there is some errors will be developed. Once this error was developed, we have to send some feedback signal, and by that this error should be reduced. So that should be done by some feedback control elements. And also after obtaining the information or signals from the different um, the different uh, places or different parameters, okay, we have to process that signals, because the obtained signals for the from the transducers may have sufficient level of the signal, may not have. Okay, for that purpose we can amplify the signal. Okay, in some cases the signals are having high frequency signals. Okay, so for that we have to reduce those frequencies and we can measure. Or in some cases you can get high values of voltage. For that we have to modify the signal. Okay, so otherwise we can also have some modify the parameters, one form to another form also you can get. So like that there is some processing equipment is required. For that processing equipment we use the processors like amplifiers. Okay, so the signals will be amplified, and this equipment will be used for drive the other systems also. From the signal processing unit we can send those signals to other systems maybe. Okay, and also we can send this information to the recorders and data storage devices. Okay, So like this we have generalized instrumentation system. So whereas coming to biomedical instrumentation system, the measuring area is different. So whereas in industries we can measure the uh, tank, the level of a tank. So there is tank is the subject. Okay, from the tank we have to measure the required parameter. So whereas in biomedical instrumentation the subject is nothing but the human being. So the basic components of the biomedical instrumentation is same as the other instrumentation system. So only difference is that living human being is considered as subject. Okay. So in this case, we will consider the living human being is considered as a subject. So from that living human being, we will measure the different parameters. Those can be called as physiological variables or physiological parameters. Generally, we can measure the uh, temperature, blood flow. Okay, blood flow and blood pressure. Okay, generally we can measure these parameters. Okay, so for measuring of these parameters we have to require some instrumentation system. Okay, so that is a combination of the biomedical instrumentation system or man instrumentation system. So it mainly consists of the following components. So the first one is subject, that is human being. Stimulus. So the stimulus is nothing but some sort of the excitation. It is nothing but some sort of the excitation. Suppose we are seeing a patient is having some type of the situation. If suddenly he was seeing some light, sudden light, his potentials generated in the mind will be different. If some person was heard different sounds, then the potentials which are produced in the mind or the response of the patient is changes. So like that, we can apply different types of the stimulus signals to excite the patient. So to make the patient recover. So for that purpose, we can apply some stimulus signals. This is also very important. And the next one is transducers. So these transducers are used to collect the data or collect the information of the human being. Okay, and from there it will be converted to the electrical form of the signals. So the transducers are used to sense the actual parameters or physiological parameters. From those parameters, corresponding electrical signals will be generated by using the transducers. So transducers functionality is converting the physiological parameters into corresponding electrical signals. Okay, and the signal conditioning equipment. So after generation of after generating signals from the transducers, those signals will be processed or maybe improve the strength of the signals, amplify the signals, or it should be modify the signals. So that's done by the signal conditioning equipment. And further that the obtained signal will be displayed on the display devices. Okay, that is display equipment. And also the data will be recorded for the data processing unit. And we have a control device. Okay, so these are the main components of a man instrumentation system. So this is the block diagram of which represents the man instrumentation system. So here we have a number of transducers. Okay, so at a time we can measure the number of parameters. This transducer may measure the heart rate. This transducer may measure the pulse rate. Okay, and like that, the number of transducers may be used to gather the information at a time. Suppose when surgery is doing, okay, so a doctor maybe continuously observe the what is the pulse rate, what is the temperature, what is the BP. Those parameters continuously they will monitor. So for that situation, at that situation, we have to use these devices to get the information at a time. For such situation, we have to use different transducers depending upon the required parameters, measurement of the required parameters. So here this is they shown that 3 transducers are used. So each transducer will convert the corresponding physiological parameter value into corresponding electrical signals. Okay, so similarly this transducer also uses the corresponding physiological parameter to the corresponding electrical signals. Like that we can use these transducers converts the physiological parameters or say physiological signals into corresponding electrical signals. Okay, so after obtaining the output from the transducer, it is connected to the signal conditioning equipment. It is connected to signal conditioning equipment. Here, the signal conditioning equipment or signal processing equipment, we can call it as signal processing equipment. So it will be sense the each signal from the transducer, okay, and interrelates all the signals. It may be sense the all the signals at a time, or it may be process the individual signals at a time, and also interrelate with each others. Okay, so according to that, it will produce some output signals. Those output signals will be sent to the some display or recording systems. Here, the main purpose of signal conditioning device or equipment is it will produces an output signal, electrical signal from the and receives the signal from the transducer, electrical signal. The input is electrical signal and output is also electrical signal. The signal conditioning equipment input is the in the form of electrical signal and output is also in the form of the electrical signal. So the main purpose of this signal conditioning equipment is here the generated input signal is having very small values in terms of the millivolts and milliamperes. The signals from the transducers is in terms of small values, it is millivolts or milliamperes. If you send this signal to the directly to recorder, so recorder is not unable to sufficient recorder unable to uh, read this information, because the to rotate the recorders or to record that information, so it requires much power. That's why the signal conditioning equipment will makes a driving force, or it will be improves the signal strength. By that, it will applies to the display device. Okay, generally we can use display devices or um, seven segment uh, seven segment displays. Okay, so to record or for the recording purposes, so all these purposes it should be send some higher power. It requires high power. That is for that purpose we can use power amplifiers. Power amplifiers. These power amplifiers will drive the recording unit and similarly to match the signal for the display. Okay, so the voltage levels of the display is different from the voltage levels of the transducers. To match between these display devices and recording devices, the transducers, we will use a signal conditioning equipments. These signal conditioning equipments will strengthen its signals by using amplifiers. If it is required to modify the signal, it will be also performs. Like that, the signal conditioning equipment will be changes or modifies the input signals. After processing the signals, those signals will be sent to display. So it will be selects any one of the parameter and display that parameter. Okay, so like that the display will be shows the actual parameter value corresponding transducer. Okay, and corresponding physiological parameter will be displayed on the display system. And at the same time, after the processing the information or signal, that signal will be sent to for the recording purpose and also data processing purpose. Okay, so after obtaining the signals from the signal conditioning equipment, it can be recorded by the recorders. So there are different types of recorders will be there. So in previous days we can record in tape recorders. Okay, and other recorders are strip chart recorders. Okay, there is this pen will be there, that pen movement is based upon the upright signal, and that pen will be releases the ink, and that ink will be falls on the rotating chart. Okay, so according to that, it will be represents the variations of the signal. Okay, like that we have number of recorders. Okay, and that signal will be sent to recording. So while processing the data, so the data from the signal conditioning equipment will we have to require to process. Okay, so it means it may be converted into digital form of energy. Suppose the apparent signal is in the form of analog form. Okay, so that may be converted into the digital form, analog to digital converts. For that, it can be used ADC. Okay, or it may be used for the uh, for for using some processing like microprocessor or some DSP processing equipments may be used. Okay, so according to that, that data will be processed. Okay, and that processed data will be displayed in terms of the, again it should be directly display to the analog displays will be there, and digital displays will be there. So from after converting into digital form, that digital signal will be displayed on the digital displays. Digital displays. Okay, so like that we have data processing and transmission of that data. That data. So after processing of this data, we can send to another locations. For that, also we can use this transmission of data equipments. Okay, and finally we have a control feedback. So this control feedback is from this signal processing equipment and display devices. So it will be senses the inputs, and according to that information, so whether it is apparent value is within the limits of the error or not. If the error is generated, again this control feedback will send signals to the stimulus. By sending the signal to the stimulus will generate the excitation pulses. Excitation pulses that depends upon different forms. Okay, so it may be in the form of electrical signals, that may be in the form of auditory. So by listening some voice, the patient response will be changes. Similarly, from video signals, by observing some video tapes, the patient response will be changes. So according to the control feedback signal, the stimulus will be generated the responding stimulus signals. Okay, so those signals will be applies on the patient. Okay, and so until to get the recovery of the patient, these control feedback signals will be applied. Okay. So again, it will measures the transducer will measures the actual uh, parameter. Okay, so until to match the required parameter, so this control signal will sends the signals. Okay, like that we have to control over the physiological parameters. So for that purpose, we have all these equipments. So this is where studied. So here we are saying that stimulus. Okay, so in any type of measurement, the response to some form of external stimulus is required. So whenever responses are to be measured, instrumentation generate and present stimulus to subject, which is a vital part of the man instrument system. So the stimulus is in the form of visual form, that is a flash of light. So by applying some flash of light, the response of the patient changes. Similarly, an auditory, that is a tone type of the response, tone type of signals. So different types of intensity. By changing the intensity, it will be varies. Okay, so and there is a direct stimulation of the some part of the nervous system. So we can directly apply the electrical potentials to the patient. So transducer device which converts one form of energy into another form of the energy. So energy or signal. So we can also say that one form of energy or signal, one form of the signal to another form of the signal. So it may be from electrical to pneumatic signal or pneumatic signal to hydraulic signals, like that signals in terms of the signals. Okay, and also in terms of energy. Okay, electrical energy, pneumatic energy. So in man instrument system, each transistor is used to produce an electrical signal that can be a log of the phenomenon being measured. So generally, the output of the transistor is in the form of the analog form. So generally, transducers measure temperature, pressure, flow, or any other variables that can be found in the body. But its output is always an electrical signals. So in the human being, we can generally measure the temperature, pressure, flow, or any other parameters can be measured. Okay, and output is in the form of electrical signals. Okay. So two or more transducers can be used simultaneously to obtain relative variation between the phenomena. So for measuring of one particular phenomena, we can use two or more transducers at a time. Okay. If it is not possible to measure with using single transducer, we can use two more transducers, or it may be direct or indirect transducer like that. So next one is signal conditioning equipment. So this signal conditioning equipment is a part of having amplifier modifies any other changes in output of the transducer called signal conditioning or signal processing equipment. It is used to combine or relate outputs of two or more transducers. We can combine the two transducers, information from the transducers. Okay, and it will also use the output. That output relates to combination of the two or three transducers. So both the input and output signals are electrical signals. Okay, and the main purpose of signal conditioning equipment is process the signals from transducers. Okay, in order to satisfy the functions of the system and to prepare the signals suitable for operating the display or recording equipment. So we have to prepare that signal which is suitable for the operation of the display or recording system. So display equipment. So display equipment is nothing but signal conditioning equipment converted to form that pressure obtained by the measurement in a meaningful way. So the input to the display system is modified electrical signal from the signal conditioning equipment. Its output is some form of visible or audible. Visible or audible. So visible means it is 7-segment display, and the audible means by hearing the sounds from headphones. So the display equipment may include a graphic pen recorder that produces a permanent record of data. So graphic pen recorder, it is one type of the recorder. Okay. So recording and data processing, data transmission equipment. So it is necessary to record measured information for appropriate uses or to transmit it from one location to another location. So in sometimes it is required to record the information, okay, and you use that information to transmit to some other places. Okay. So for that purpose, we can use this recording and data processing and data transmission equipment. The equipment for this function is an important part of man instrument system, where automatic storage or processing of data is required, where computer control is employed, and online analog or digital computer may be part of the instrument system. In some cases, in the place of this um, storage, data processing and recording system stage, we can use the some computers also. Online analog and digital computers may be used for storage purposes. In such situation, we can use some memory devices. In the memory devices, this data will be recorded. Okay. The term recorder is used in two different contexts in biomedical instrumentation. So graphic pen recorder, it is actually a display device used to produce a paper record of analog form. So it will be graphic pen recorder is a type of the, it will produces the waveform, analog waveform. Okay, on the paper. It is a permanent record. It is a permanent record. Whereas the recording equipment includes devices by which data can be recorded for future playback as in a magnetic tape recorder. So magnetic tapes will be used. So tape recorders. Okay. So magnetic tapes recorders are used. Again, if you have to observe the previous what happens, that is we can retrieve the data or we can replay the data. Okay. For that purpose, we can go for the magnetic tape recorders and control device where it is necessary to have automatic control of the transducer, stimulus, or any part of the management system. Control system is incorporated. Suppose we have to control of the transducer and stimulus or any part of the instrument. So for that purpose, we can use the control system. Okay. So control system is the main part of the instrument system because so suppose we want to measure any one transducer or we have to connect any one transducer, so that will be done by the control system. Otherwise, suppose we want to use all the transducers at a time, so the usage of those transducers and the gathering of that information, all things should be under the control of the control system. Okay. This control system consists of a feedback loop, okay, which is part of output from signal conditioning equipment or display equipment, is used to control the operation of the system. Okay. So generally, the input for the control system is taken from the display or signal processing unit, and from depending upon that signals, it will be generate the output signals, and those output signals will be sent to stimulus, and from that it and also transducers. So according to that applied signals, those transducers and stimulus will be get the informations. So up to now we have discussed about the main components of man instrumentation system or biomedical instrumentation system. So the next one is problems encountered in measuring a living system. So there are number of problems will be occurs while measuring the physiological parameters of a human being. Suppose we want to measure the temperature of a boiler, we just place a transducer. According to that, it will produces the output. We will measure the temperature. Okay. So, but for living human being system, it is very difficult because the patient came with some problem. So he will become he will be having some problem. He does not just like he does not fall on the like just like that. So he will be changes. He will be moves. He will be moves continuously. So in such situation, it is difficult to obtain the physiological parameters by using these transducers. So every time it will be changes. Okay, because the patient is moving, you know? So due to his problem, due to his pain, he not a stable way, so he is moving. Due to that also there the obtained output signals will be changes. So like that, this is one problem. So like that, there are number of problems will be encountered in measuring a living system. So for the first one is inaccessibility of variable to be measurement. So we are unable to measure the variables. Suppose we want to record the information of the brain. How we can place the these electrodes? So it is difficult. So we cannot access that one directly. We cannot put the electrode into our brain. We cannot put. So in such situation, we go for the indirect measurements. So that is one of the example, inaccessibility of variable to be measured. So it is greatest difficulty in attempting from a living system is a problem in gaining the variable being measured. So the variable which is to be measured is difficult to gather that information. Okay. For example, neurochemical activity of brain. So what is happening in the brain? Okay. So what type of the chemical actions will be happening in the brain? So neurochemical activity of brain. Okay. It is impossible to place a transducer. So we need to do the indirect measurement. So it is nothing but inaccessible of the variable. So in using indirect measurement, one must be aware of the limitations. Okay. So it simply does not measure indirectly. Okay. And the variability of the data. So most of the cases, the data will be continuously changes. There is no fixed data. So the data will be variables, physiological variables continuously changes. Okay. And there is no perfect, this is the perfect and this is not perfect. You cannot say. This is the accurate value, this is not accurate value. So it will be changes continuously depending upon the patient or the human being. So that's why the data which is obtained at this moment is different, from data obtained after 1 or 2 hours or 1 or 2 days. So that's why every time we went to the hospital, so they are saying that take the blood report. Today we went to hospital. The doctors told that take the blood report. After 1 week we went again. So again he will said that take the blood report. We think that why just 1 week before only we are taken. Why again doctor is saying like that? So because the every time the variables will be changes. Okay, so the parameters or response of the different systems will be changes. That's why at that moment there is no perfect value. It should not be perfect value. Okay? The blood pressure may be changes. The sugar levels may be changes within 1 week. Okay, so that's why there is no fixed variables is not available. Okay, so next one is so lack of knowledge of interrelationship. So while getting the information, so we do not have any knowledge how this one parameter is interrelated to other parameters. Generally, we can say the blood will be shows the any type of the problem which is present in the human being, because the blood will be sent to all the organs. That's why in the blood report we will get the condition of all the organs of the body. Okay, if we don't have any knowledge how the functionality of one organ to another organ, so if we don't have any knowledge, then we are unable to read that information. So that is one of the problem. Okay, and also we should know the limits of the those variables. So better understanding of physiological relationship would also permit more effective use of indirect measurements as substitutes for inaccessible measure. So the next one is interaction among physiological systems. So and also you should know the interaction between one among the other. Okay, so how the suppose our eyes are seeing that information, seeing the world. Okay, how it will be interacts with some other parts. Okay, just I am saying. Okay, so how my hand is changing. So there is a interrelation between one physiological system and another physiological system. So vision is the one of the physiological system. Movement of this hand is another physiological system. So you should know the interaction among these two. And mind should be brain should be give the signals by observing the by signals from the eyes. It will be acts according to that. Okay, and give the speech. This is the speech sound system. So it will be acts like that. So that interaction between the different physiological system is also one of the parameters, and these are related, these are connected by some number of feedback loops, because our human being is having 5 sensors, 5 types of sensors, and every time it will be senses the information and sends the information to the brain, and according to that the brain will be gives the signals. Okay, and like that it will be acts. Okay, suppose if depending upon that systems interaction systems, it will produces some stimulation. Okay, so some sort of extra signals will be generated, and those signals will be sent to the different parts of the body. Okay, it will affect the different parts of the body. Suppose if a person is angry, okay, he is shouting like that, anything. So then how after certain amount of time he will be making some shivering. Or suppose in the night you suddenly seen a snake is going in front of you, how you are shocked. So okay, so like that there is a interaction between your eyes and your body movements. Okay, so like that there is some interactions. If the doctor has does not have this knowledge of the interaction of different physiological systems, it is a one of the problem. So the next one is effect of transducer. So different types of transducers will be used. Okay, so active transducers and passive transducers. Okay, and the due to this transducers also the actual signal does not produce the output properly. So that will be also affects the measurement of physiological parameter. So it is also one of the big problem. If the applied transducer is able to produce the proper output, then it is okay. If the transducer has the problem, itself has the problem, it does not respond properly. But the doctor does not know whether this system is functioning properly or not. Okay, so then it is a big problem. So next, artifacts. Artifacts are nothing but it is a like our communication we have noise, so unwanted signals. Okay, like that while measuring the some particular physiological systems, we will get unwanted signals like our 60 hertz pickups and crosstalk and unwanted variations and energy limitations. So we should know the how much amount of energy you should apply to the patient. So there are certain things, energy limitations are there. So while measuring the resistance, it requires some flow of the electric current and how much of current should be applied to get that information. So that all should be know the energy limitations. These are the some problems. Safety considerations. Must know the that applied signals should have certain amount. Suppose the applying patient should not get any shock. Okay, there are some certain